This class deals with usability and user interface design. More specifically, we're talking about the internet, the use of appropriate website designs, and looking at the use of appropriate website designs. Now, this class fits in with other classes in the series and should be viewed in the context of those as well. But to start, we need to discuss what is usability. Well, usability is the ease with which we can learn how to use a website. Websites have links and different facilities, and we need to know how to use the website. And of course, the more we use it, the easier we find using it. It should be easy to use. It should be easy to remember, so that every time we use it, we don't have to go back to the start. We remember that certain links do certain things. And it should give us user satisfaction. It should be efficient as well. It should bring up the information we want in an efficient manner. So we don't have to go looking for information. We don't have to try and interpret where the information could be, or it shouldn't be hidden away. It should be efficient. And there should be an effectiveness of use. It should be an effective site. It should give us the answers that we want. It should give us the insights that we require. It should be effective. Now, usability engineering, sometimes abbreviated to UE, the effort is to build usability into products. It's pointless just simply making a product that users find difficult to use. So it's important to build in usability, to build in ease of use, and make the product effective, and all of the issues we met on the previous slide. So various design processes should be investigated to improve usability. Generally speaking, it's a good idea to form a small group, perhaps a group of people who are not directly involved with the product, but who nonetheless could give valuable contributions and criticisms of the design and of the functionality of the product, or in the case we're discussing here, of the website. There should be a focus on user experience throughout the design. The products are made for users. The products are not made for the web designer. The web designer is not designing a website for him or herself. They're, generally speaking, designing the website for the use of others. So others should be taken into account and their views canvassed. Developers may believe that it takes too long to do this, or that it's too expensive, or indeed that it's not critical to development. And sometimes they believe that they can learn about the user problems and users' experiences when the site goes live. And this may be too late. If it takes too long to get the site right, in their view, it's not a waste. Getting it wrong may alienate the users from the business, from the product. If it's too expensive, then it shouldn't be done in the first place, I suppose. Perhaps it's not an appropriate medium. But it's important that the site helps the users, because that's what creates a positive image of the business. And don't wait for mistakes to happen and for users to feedback errors and problems. That's too late. So you shouldn't wait for it to go live. It should be sorted out in advance. Perhaps a focus group looking at the site, making comments, making criticisms. These should be taken on board during the development stage. The benefits of usability engineering to an organization, well, it reduces training costs, because the the user is put at the center of the development, and the user's requirements are central, so that the developers have a model to work to. They're not simply experimenting. So it reduces development costs by identifying and fixing problems early. The designers know what the users want because they've had feedback, let's say. So therefore they're able to factor this into their designs and get it right from the start. So user or usability engineering can reduce support costs. By getting it right, there is less support required for the site. So less need for support personnel and help desks. And there's less fixes required later, less maintenance and less upgrades. It was right in the first place. If it's designed properly in the first place, these things are not necessary. It's not necessary to have fixes and maintenance and upgrades, and it was done correctly in the first place. And of course this enhances the organization's reputation. It's a positive thing. People talk about the organization in a positive context. There's good word of mouth comments about the site and about the product and about the company. And larger numbers will hit the site, and there'll be more return visits because it's a good experience. The site is a good experience for the users. Now for the user, the usability engineering, well, it takes less time to complete the work, and there's greater success with tasks and greater user satisfaction. So there are many benefits from usability engineering, trying to get it right the first time. The main website usability problems were, well, navigation, trying to find ways around the site, and putting in easy search. The hyperlinks should be clearly indicated, and they should go to where they promise. If the hyperlink is to a certain page, it should go to that page. And the search facility on the site should be capable of picking up on keywords and sorting out the page and the information that's required. There should be good structure also to the website. It should be logically set out. The pages should be grouped together in logical fashion. And each individual page should be properly laid out. There should be sufficient white space. It shouldn't be cluttered up. Every bit of the page should not contain information and contain graphics and animations and so on. It should be clean. It should be uncluttered. And try to avoid the use of large graphics because it takes time to download them and perhaps they're not seen as necessary. User-centered design. Well, user-centered design is a dialogue between the customer and the designer. So the designer seeks the feedback of customers. The designer tries to talk to customers and potential customers even at the outset to try and get a feeling for what is required and try to design around the comments that are fed back from the customers. And there are rules of thumb. The knowledge of user requirements. Try to capture that. What do the users want? That's a rule of thumb. So don't deviate from it. Try to address what the users want. And build an application applying usability principles. Don't go egocentric and try to design something which has never been seen before. Try to design a site that factors in the requirements of the users in terms of usability. And try to test the designs by observing users in a real work setting. Try to test out the site. Try to get people to use the site, observe them, pick up on comments, interview them afterwards, get them to fill out questionnaires, perhaps do some attitudinal testing, ask them to rank different aspects of the site on terms of a scale from, say, 0 to 5 or whatever, 5 being the best, 0 being no use, whatever. So ask them to rank their feelings about the site. So the usability principles, well, we can identify many of these: layout, content awareness, the aesthetics, the user experience, the consistency, and the minimal use of effort. Well, layout. The layout should be consistent right throughout the site. Each page should have the same feel. Otherwise the user will become disorientated. They'll feel like they have left the site and gone to a different site. The link has taken them someplace else. So the pages on the site should be consistent. There should be consistent layout. And the content should be vetted for offensive comments. And it should be culturally and ethically acceptable. The content of the site should be checked to make sure that the wording is acceptable. The aesthetics, well, it should be easy to read and to understand. It should be pleasing to access. Good use of colors and fonts and good design, good use of images. So it should be aesthetically pleasing, good design. Again, perhaps based on the comments of users, what they would like to see, and factoring those in. User experience, well, ease of use with clear instructions and navigation. Someone approaching the site for the first time will want to be taken through the site. They want to find it an easy experience. If they get put off, they may not come back. So it's important that they see the site and are capable of dealing with it the first time out. And more experienced users will know the site and it will be memorable to them, and they will find it much easier to use. It should also be consistent. This means that the users can predict what will happen under certain circumstances. When they click a link, they can predict where the page is going. It's consistent. If the page says it's going to a particular product, it should go to that product. That's consistency. And the same result should follow every time. Every time they click on that link, it should go to that page. It's consistent. There should be minimal use of effort. The site should be simple to use. Most writers on the subject seem to suggest that there should not be more than 3 mouse clicks necessary to locate a desired page. 3 mouse clicks should get you where you're going. It's not a hard and fast rule, but it's worth bearing in mind. People don't want to click many times to try and get where they're going. They should be able to get there in an efficient manner. So 3 clicks, that's probably good enough. So there should be minimal effort in using the site. Now, the personnel requirements for design. Well, lots of people may be involved. There may be an analyst, a systems analyst, who will look at the requirements of the site and will look at the design of the site and the sort of functionality of the site, what's required in the site. And then the designers, what should the site look like? How should it be laid out on the screen? A technology expert, someone who assesses the site for ease of use and ease of download, that the graphics are not too heavy or will not take a long time to download, or that videos will load up fast or whatever. There should be someone who will make comments about the coding and make sure it's an efficient use of coding. A graphics artist might be used to design the site or design parts of the site to give it a uniqueness and extra attraction. There may be social and behavioral scientists who are involved to try and work out whether the site will be attractive to the users. And there'll also be a programmer, someone who will put it all together and make it work, deliver the site. The basic principles, well, assume users have not read the manual. So it's always a good thing to assume that the users of a site are just approaching it, just clicked on it, it's arrived on the screen, they're the first time users, they haven't got any prior knowledge, so they haven't read any manuals or instructions. They haven't attended any training associated with the site. And also they don't have any external help readily at hand. So the users are just there, they're confronted by the site, they don't have any support. Therefore, all the controls should be clear and understandable and placed in an intuitive location on the screen. So it's important that all the controls are available to them and they can see what the controls do, what the links do, where they go. They can understand the site by just looking at the screen. Now, the interface design prototyping. Well, it's important that the interface is designed properly and checked out in advance of development. So it's a good idea to have a storyboard, just some sketches as to what links to what comes first, what comes second, what happens if a certain link is pressed, where does it go, how do they get back from there. So it's a bit like a flow diagram with little arrows pointing from one part to the next. So there's an overall consistency can be worked out from the storyboard. Then get a HTML prototype. Get some basic HTML pages and hyperlink them according to what the storyboard suggests. And test the language. Test the language that's used in the site. Get experts to read over the language, read over the comments, read over the whole set of words, languages, paragraphs. Read over the lot to make sure that it's not offensive, that it's logical, it's in the right place. So it all fits in terms of the HTML prototype that's been developed. And then the interface evaluation. Test it. Do it experimentally, do it heuristically, so that there is a good feeling for how the interface will work. Get it up and running so that the developers, the other developers working with the main developer, can see what the plan is, what it will look like. And put in some links and walk through the links, sort of click on the links and see, make sure that the links are working. And if there's any interactivity required, factor those in, get them into the interface, so that if any feedback is required from the user, put in a feedback button and make it obvious what it is and put it onto the interface. And when all of that's done, test it out properly. Do some formal usability testing. Get in some people and give them the model to test it out. It's not live, it's not on the internet. These are pages that have been developed locally, running on perhaps a local server, or perhaps just working on individual laptops. So just get people to make comments about the product, so that an overall picture can be worked out. The heuristic technique I talked about earlier Well, this is one in which we find or discover. That's what we mean by it. We do it by almost by experimentation. We try to find or discover. It's any approach to problem solving, learning, or discovery that implies a practical methodology, not guaranteed to be optimal or perfect, but sufficient for the immediate goals. And that's a definition that's taken from Wikipedia. So heuristic, when we talk about heuristic technique, as we did back in 4.1, that's what we mean. We mean something, an approach which we just try out various solutions to try and find the right one. Creating the user interface prototype. Well, low-level prototypes may be used. For example, it may be possible to design the whole thing on paper. Just sides of A4, lots of little storyboard type sketches and diagrams with arrows pointing what goes next and which link goes to where, and so it may be possible to do the whole thing on paper. Or it might be possible to do it on PowerPoint, or just develop some HTML pages in a HTML editor. So that's a possibility. You could end up with some sort of very basic page. This one perhaps is not appropriate. There are too many colors. The page is full. There's not enough white space. It's crowded. The fonts perhaps are too big or whatever. But just something called Somewhere University, a search box, how to enroll, the type of courses, some graphics, some students at the bottom throwing their mortarboards into the sky. That could be a starting point. And perhaps following some criticisms from perhaps a focus group, it could be altered. Perhaps some of the graphics taken out and some of the colors changed and the columns changed, and gradually it will move towards, heuristically, move towards a proper design. Now the interface dialog design, well, the team needs to worry about the layout, the buttons, the text, the table and so on. They also need to look at the structuring of data entry, tab orders and so on. The team also needs to control the data input, validation and format controls. So any data that's put in, the team needs to control it. And also feedback, prompting, status, warning and error messages. Again, the team should be involved in looking at this and trying to get an appropriate design to deal with these. And also dialogue sequencing. So the interface dialogue design is important, and there should be wide comments sought from the team, and perhaps, as I said many times over, perhaps from a focus group or from a panel that's put together of non-experts, potential users perhaps, who will make comments about different aspects of the interface design. So what is a dialogue? Well, a sequence of interactions between the system and the user. That's all it is. It's a set of interactions between the system and a user. Dialogue design involves designing a dialogue sequence, building a prototype, and assessing usability. So the dialogue is it's a two-way communication. It's the system communicating with the user, and the user inputting instructions, perhaps hyperlink requests into the system and getting the system to respond. So it's building prototypes It's looking at the sequence, the dialog sequence, and it's assessing the usability. Now there's also the need for graphical user interface design guidelines. So graphical user interface normally means that we're looking at a screen and the screen shows the hyperlinks. We're able to use the mouse. The mouse can hover over a link, perhaps and change color or just indicate that it's hovering over a link. This is a graphic user interface, GUI. And in this case, with these guidelines, the user is in control. The user moves the cursor around the screen and picks out the links that he or she wants. There should be consistency, that if the user clicks a particular link, it goes to a particular page, and every time the user clicks that link, it goes to the same page. It may be possible to customize and personalize particular pages. Some sites have that facility. It's not central, but it adds to the attractiveness of the site if that can be programmed in. So the user registers on the site, and the next time the user registers, the site remembers, the server remembers where the user was or which page they're on or what the particular preferences of the users are. And if the user makes a mistake, the site forgives. So if the user clicks on a link and goes to a page and it clicks back, it's not registered and held against the user. It was a mistake. But it can also get feedback from the site about the time the user spends on the site and which links were clicked and which products were looked at, and the site may be able to remember which parts of the site were most popular with the user, and the next time the user accesses the site, the same position is brought back into play, so the user doesn't have to start from scratch. They're able to continue from where they were. And of course, aesthetics and usability are important in terms of GUI as well. The graphical user interface should be nice. It should be a pleasant experience. The page should be well laid out, and the hyperlinks nicely set out, and it should be easy to use. So the user is in control. That's the point. And there are different parts to this one, as we've just talked about. We talked about the 6 areas previously. User in control, consistency, personalization, forgiveness, feedback, aesthetics, and usability. So now what we'll do is we'll go to user control. Rather, the user's perception of control is important. So it's not necessarily that the user is in control of the site, because the site contains code and that's saved at the server end. But the user has the perception of control. So the user is able to click a link and it'll go to certain pages. And the user should feel that they are initiating the action. The user is in control of the site. Nothing is happening without the user clicking on the mouse or clicking on the link. And feedback is necessary for this to work. So the user is in control of the site. That's important. Next we have consistency. A GUI developer must not be too creative, I should say, or innovative in the design interface. So by being too creative, it means maybe too sophisticated. It may complicate the design. It may lead to the user becoming confused about what is required, what link goes where, or what do they need to do next. So the GUI developer, the graphical user interface, should not be too sophisticated. Now the second point here is the site should conform to the naming, coding and other GUI related standards developed internally by the organization. It's important that the organization is able to check the site and update the site, and that there are standards by which it's able to find its way around its own site. So it should be able to link different pages to products and code numbers that it uses in its own business. So menus, for example, and action buttons and screen fields, etc. The naming of these should be consistent with the names of the products and even the departments or the part numbers or whatever. So there should be consistency between them. It also includes standards for the placement of screen objects and the consistent use of other GUI elements across applications. There seems to be an emerging almost consensus about some of the GUI designs, that the search box, for example, will go in the top right hand corner. That's fairly well established. So the user to a site will expect to find a search box in that location. The banner goes across the top. It's a pretty obvious thing to say, but the banner does go across the top. The banner may be quite small by comparison with banners in the past. Some navigation down the left hand side. Again, that's fairly standard. So there's a consistency between one GUI development, one graphic user interface development, and another. It may not be identical, but there's some sort of consistency. Personalization and customization. GUI personalization is customization for personal use. For example, a user records and resizes columns in a grid display and saves these changes as preferences. That may be possible. It may be possible that when the user signs in to a site, the site remembers the way the user had the particular interface before and brings back that page. So the user may have resized the columns or changed some of the locations to match his or her own preferences. And upon exit, the server saves those preferences, and the next time the user logs in, it brings back those preferences. GUI customization is an administrative task of tailoring the software to different groups of users. So, for example, the program may operate differently for a novice than for an advanced user. So the more that people use the site, the more expert they become, and the site adapts to the greater expertise of the more experienced users. Forgiveness. A good interface allows users to experiment and make mistakes in a forgiving way. Forgiveness encourages interface exploration because the user is allowed to take erroneous routes that can be rolled back, even to the starting point if necessary. Forgiveness implies facilities such as multi-level undo operations and the ability to cancel long-running actions. We've all hit the wrong link in the past, and rather than, when we're here on a strange page, rather than go look for some way of navigating back, we go back to the browser and we hit the undo or we hit the return button on the browser, which is normally on the top left hand side. We just click on it and we go back to the previous browser presentation. So the site is forgiving. We have a way back. We've undone our mistake. Feedback. Well, feedback guidelines are a spin-off of the first guideline, the user in control. To be in control involves knowing what is going on when the control is temporarily with the program. So when the program is doing something, the user still knows what's going on. The developer should build visual and or audio cues for every user event. For example, an hourglass or a timer. So when the user requests some functionality, and it's going to take some time for the server to deliver that functionality, and then perhaps an hourglass appears that shows the user that it's going to take a little bit of time, so please wait. If the hourglass doesn't appear, it may seem that the whole site has gone dead, that there is an error, that the site has crashed. So rather than believing that, the user is getting some feedback, and the feedback is telling it what the site is doing. So if the user clicks on a link and it's going to take some time, they get a cue that it's going to take some time. There's an hourglass, so please be patient, please wait. Aesthetics and usability. Aesthetics is about the visual appeal of the site. Usability is about the ease, simplicity, efficiency, reliability in using the interface. So it's important that the site should be visually appealing. It should be a nice site to visit. But also usability, it's easy to use, it's simple, it's efficient, it's reliable, and this makes the site more attractive. There's more chance that people will visit the site and more chance that they will return to the site afterwards. The issue to consider include the fixation and movement of the human eye. So when you're talking about aesthetics and usability, we're looking here at how people look at the site. So people have a website in front of them, let's say on their laptop. Are they looking at the top left-hand corner? Are they looking at the center of the site? Where are they looking? What's the use of colors? What colors clash? What colors are fit in with the product? If the product is something to do with some natural soap or natural product, perhaps the colors will be predominantly blue for the sea or in the sky, or green for the countryside. We would not expect to find very garish red colors because they don't fit with the product. So there has to be a good use of colors related to the product. And there has to be a sense of balance and symmetry. The page should be laid out in a way that it all fits together. It's logical and it's appealing. The alignment and spacing of the elements should be appropriate. There should be white space. It should be uncluttered. It should be appealing. It should have a relaxing feeling to it, not an intensity with lots of words and lots of animations and lots of graphics. It should be easily recorded and picked up in the mind of the user. The user should be able to read it and understand it very straightforwardly. The font size, it should look professional. It should be uncluttered. So the alignment and spacing of the elements should be set out according to this. There should be a sense of proportion. It should be balanced. The text and everything should not be over in the left-hand corner. It should be set out nicely across the page, logically and uncluttered. And elements should be grouped according to what they do. If they're related, they should be grouped together. So if it is a site selling natural products, perhaps cosmetic products, soaps and deodorants and so on, they should be grouped together. not scattered around the page, but tastefully grouped together. And the responsiveness of the system, it should be brought up on any screen. It should be capable of being accessed on a smartphone or on a tablet or a small laptop, a large laptop, on a big desktop monitor. And the second use of the word responsiveness here is that the site should respond fast to a click of the link. It's a different interpretation of the word responsiveness, but that should also be the case. And it should be simple to use. And there should be support if required. There should be a link for support to help the user navigate just in case something goes wrong. The principle of grouping, well, proposed by Gestalt psychologists. Humans perceive objects as organized patterns and objects. There are 6 forms of groupings that need to be considered when we're looking at groupings of objects, and particularly in the context of the internet. These 6 are listed here. Proximity, the closeness of the products. The similarity, how similar are they. Closure, good continuation. False fate, and good form. So let's have a look at these and see what's meant. The principles of groupings means that web designers can take these into account when designing their sites, and this will help to produce a more balanced and a more pleasing website. Let's start by looking at the proximity. A tendency to group stimuli close together as part of the same object. That's what we mean by proximity. It's a tendency to group stimuli close together as part of the same object. We tend to look at groups, not individual objects. And we look at groups because it reduces our processing time. So here we're looking at groups of objects. We're looking at little triangles. And what we're doing here is we are looking at the groupings. It reduces our processing time. We're saying, okay, the first one has got three columns. The second one's got 2 columns. The first one's got 1 column. So we know that the column to the left is 3 times as big as the column to the right. There's no sophisticated mathematics required. We just group them together. It's a visual thing. We're looking at it. And they are proximate. They are grouped together. Similarity. We perceive objects that are similar. So we can run across here. We've got triangles and we've got little ellipses or circles. And we group them. We group them because we can see them. They are distinct. We tend to complete pictures sometimes, or forms, even if they are incomplete. The one on the left is a set of lines. Some of the lines are little angles on them, and some of them are just incomplete lines. But in fact, if you look at the object in total, it's a triangle. We've completed it in our head. It's a principle of closure. The one on the right, a set of lines again, but in fact, if you look at it, it's a rectangle. Principle of closure. So, good continuation. Well, look at this one. What do you see? We see a blue rectangle with a white spot and a black ring around the spot. So we see 1 circle. Now we see 2 circles. So it's the principle of continuation. We've got 2 circles and we've got a grouping of them. Now we put some lines through them. So now we've got two white circles, black line around each, and an X through each of them. Now we put in some lines, a bit like a triangle that's not complete. And then we fill it out and we see we've got a bicycle. So we started with simply two white circles, and now we've ended up with a bicycle. It's not a very detailed bicycle, but it's enough for me to recognize it as a bicycle. I can't see the pedals, for example. I can't see the chain that propels the bicycle when people pedal along. I don't need to see it. I know that's a bicycle. I see it as a bicycle. Common fate. Well, when objects move at the same rate and in the same direction, we associate them as part of the same stimulus. So when things are moving the same way, moving in the same direction, we consider they're part of the same stimulus. For example, a flock of birds flying together may be interpreted as responding to the same stimulus. We often see birds flying very close together, flying very fast, and when one bird turns, they all turn together. They don't seem to crash into each other, they just turn together. They're responding to the same stimulus. It's common fate. Good form. Objects may be grouped by similar shape or other attributes. When patterns of shapes overlap, the brain may still disentangle them and perceive them as the individual components. So we look at similar shapes or other attributes, and when patterns of shapes overlap, we can still disentangle them. So there are 10 golden usability rules. This is Jacob Nielsen, Usability Engineering. The first one is use simple and natural dialogue language. Simple interfaces reduce the possibility of mistake. So use simple, natural dialogue language. Secondly, the language of the site should be easily understood by the users. Thirdly, easy memorable controls with easy access and help and guidance support. Number 4, the graphical user interface should be consistent and coherent. The navigational links should be working and point consistently to appropriate pages. Number 5, allow expert users to access shortcut keys, for example, using macros. A macro is a small program that's usually developed in Excel, for example, to do calculations in Excel. But it's possible to imagine small programs running in the background in all sorts of contexts. 6. Give good and frequent feedback to the users. 7. Try to avoid the possibility of errors. Warn the users of actions that may have serious consequences. So tell the users if they are about to make a big mistake that's going to cause a problem for the computer or for them. So try to avoid the possibility of errors. Number 8, clearly indicate backup options in the event of user mistakes. Try to help the user undo the mistake. Number 9, give clear, unambiguous, precise, polite, and non-intimidatory messages. When the site needs to communicate with the user, make sure the messages are clear, unambiguous, precise, polite, and not intimidatory, not threatening in any way. Finally, make support notes and manuals available. So there should be a link to some extra support if required. So if the user really is curious about how everything works or what to do in certain situations, that support is there if they want it. There's a link to it. Usability testing, well, identify problems. So collect data, task times, error rates, comments, observations, and analyze these to try and get a fix on what the problems are. Test preparation, determine who and what to evaluate. What questions do you want to answer? Involve a qualified person to analyze results. And test the protocol, test the procedures. General test protocol. Well, a general test protocol should have an introduction. There should be informed consent form. In other words, those participating should agree to be tested and dealt with in this way. There should be some training, and then the tasks should be set out clearly and performed by the people selected. And then there should be a questionnaire to pick up the results and some sort of debriefing. So that's a good way of testing a design. Then there's the so-called think aloud approach. Users should navigate through the website and say aloud what they think and what and doing as they do so. So they should say what they're thinking and doing. Sorry, go back one. The users should understand they can make both negative and positive comments. So just allow the users to talk their way through the site and perhaps record what they're saying, and out of this alter the design to deal with any criticisms or any issues that arise. So record the comments. And develop an interview protocol to guide your discussion with users. And finally, probe issues of concern. Ask for further comment, ask why they did say certain things, why did they like or dislike certain things. So, step one, plan the tests. Determine how the users will participate in the test. Estimate how many tests will be required over the development cycle. Determine usability objectives and what functions will be tested. And develop evaluation measures, timing data, error counts, rating scales, etc. So when you're conducting a test of a site, the usability of a site, perhaps you want to estimate how many tests will be required and determine the objectives, the usability objectives that will be tested, and set out some evaluation measures, how we were going to evaluate the test. The conduct of tests, if a number of people are working to test the usability of a site, it may be the case that you need to provide a good introduction or overview for the users so that they know exactly what the test is about. And you might want to provide training for the users. Have the observers watch, listen and take notes. Sometimes the users will say what they are likely to do when they're likely to do something, but their actual behavior indicates otherwise. So it's best to observe the user's behavior, watch them, and attempt to use, as they attempt to use the website. So watch the users, how they use the website, not listen to them only, just observe how they're working on the site. And debrief them. Ask for what they felt about the site, what issues they confronted and what issues they liked and didn't like. And get them to complete evaluation forms and get them to express their reactions about the whole test to see if the test was clear to them and they knew what they were doing. In the post-test work, analyze the data identify usability problems and solutions, identify the severity of the problems, identify software bugs, because some of the issues might be software, not the design of the site, and perhaps conduct a second round of testing. It all depends on the resources, but a second round of testing may iron out some of the issues. So usability is really a situation where the designer is trying to find out what works and what does not work, what is good design. And probably the best way of doing it is setting up a test and getting a group of people to deal with the site and itemizing what is wrong with the site, what issues they confronted, observing them conducting the test, and debriefing them at the end, and trying to find out if there are any pressing issues that need to be addressed, and the minor issues will have to be looked at, but depending on the resources, it may be that the larger issues need to be dealt with first and a second round of testing conducted to see if issues still remain. And that's all I'm going to deal with in terms of usability. It's an important topic. It's one that the users have issues that need to be addressed, but they need to bring out the issues, and these need to be adduced through some sort of testing arrangement. And the users could be grouped together, and if similar factors are discovered by groups of users, then clearly these are important issues and need to be looked at. The objectives of the measures need to be clear, they need to be set out, and the key problems identified and addressed. But they need to be, as I said earlier, they need to be sorted and prioritized, and then the solutions worked, and perhaps a retest conducted. But that's all I'm going to deal with. I'm going to leave it at that and say thank you for watching.